Sarah Chen was making coffee in her small apartment when the phone rang. It was Thursday morning and rain hit her window hard. She almost did not answer because she thought it might be another bill collector. Money was tight, and her student loans seemed to grow bigger every month. "Hello, is this Sarah Chen?" asked a deep voice. "Yes, that's me," Sarah said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "My name is Robert Williams. I am a lawyer from Millbrook. I have some important news about your family." Sarah sat down. She did not know any lawyers, and she had never heard of Millbrook. "I think you have the wrong person," she said. "Are you the great niece of Margaret Blackwood?" the lawyer asked. Sarah thought hard. She had never heard that name before. Her family was small, and her grandmother had died when Sarah was young. Her parents never talked much about other relatives. "I don't think so," Sarah said. "I don't know anyone named Margaret." The lawyer was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Margaret was your grandmother's sister. She lived alone for many years. She died last week and she left everything to you." Sarah's coffee cup shook in her hand. "Left everything to me? But I never met her. I never even knew she existed." "That happens sometimes with old families," Mr. Williams said. "Margaret had no children, and you are her only living relative. She left you her house and all her money." Sarah felt dizzy. This had to be some kind of mistake. "How much money?" she asked quietly. "The house is worth a lot, and there is about $50,000 in the bank. But there is something you should know. The house has been empty for over 20 years. Margaret lived in a nursing home for the last part of her life." Sarah could not believe what she was hearing. She worked at a grocery store and could barely pay her rent. $50,000 seemed like a dream. And a house? She had always wanted to own a house. "Where is this house?" she asked. "In Millbrook. It's about 300 miles from where you live. The house is very old, built in the 1800s. It's quite large." Sarah's mind raced. She could sell the house and pay off her student loans. Or maybe she could live there and save money on rent. Either way, this could change her whole life. "What do I need to do?" she asked. "You need to come to Millbrook and sign some papers. Then the house will be yours. Can you come this weekend?" Sarah thought about her job. She worked part-time at the grocery store, and her boss would not be happy if she missed work. But this was too important to wait. "I can come on Saturday," she said. Mr. Williams gave her his address and told her to bring identification. After she hung up, Sarah sat in her kitchen for a long time. She looked around her tiny apartment with its broken heater and leaky faucet. Maybe her luck was finally changing. She called her best friend Lisa and told her the news. "That's amazing," Lisa said, "but also kind of weird. Why didn't your family ever mention this Margaret person?" Sarah had been wondering the same thing. "I don't know. Maybe there was some kind of family fight years ago." "Are you really going to drive 300 miles to see some house you might not even want?" "Lisa, it's $50,000. Even if I hate the house, I can sell it and finally pay off my loans." That night, Sarah could not sleep. She kept thinking about this mysterious great-aunt who had lived alone for so many years. Why had Margaret never tried to contact Sarah, and why leave everything to someone she had never met? On Friday, Sarah asked her boss for the day off on Saturday. He was not happy, but Sarah promised to work extra hours the next week. She borrowed Lisa's car because her own car was old and might not make the long trip. Saturday morning came with gray clouds and cold wind. Sarah packed a small bag in case she needed to stay overnight. She printed out directions to Millbrook and started driving. The first 2 hours were easy. She drove on big highways with lots of traffic, but as she got closer to Millbrook, the roads became smaller. There were fewer cars and more trees. The town she passed through looked old and quiet. She stopped for gas in a small town about 30 miles from Millbrook. The gas station was old, and the man behind the counter looked like he had worked there for many years. "You heading to Millbrook?" he asked when he saw her directions. "Yes, do you know it?" The man's face changed. He looked uncomfortable. "Yeah, I know it. Quiet place, not many visitors." "I'm inheriting a house there," Sarah said, feeling proud. The man stared at her. "What house?" "The Blackwood house. My great-aunt just died." The man's eyes got wide. He looked around the empty gas station like he was worried someone might hear. The Blackwood place? That big old mansion on the hill? I guess so. The lawyer said it was large and old. The man shook his head slowly. Miss, can I give you some advice? Sell that place as fast as you can and don't look back. Sarah felt a chill run down her back. Why? What's wrong with it? Nothing's wrong with the house itself, the man said quietly. It's just, that place has history. Bad history. The Blackwood family. Well, let's just say they weren't well liked in these parts. Before Sarah could ask more questions, another customer came in. The old man turned away and would not look at her again. Sarah paid for her gas and left, but his words stayed in her mind. The last 30 miles to Millbrook felt longer than the whole rest of the trip. The trees got thicker and the sky got darker. Sarah saw only a few houses, and most of them looked empty. When she finally saw a sign that said, "Welcome to Millbrook," she felt nervous. The town was small, with just a few streets and old buildings. Everything looked like it had been built 50 years ago and never updated. She found Mr. Williams' office on Main Street. It was in an old brick building next to a small bank. When she walked in, a secretary led her to a back room where Mr. Williams was waiting. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. He shook her hand and smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "Thank you for coming, Miss Chen. I have all the papers ready for you to sign." As Sarah signed document after document, she asked about the house. "It's about 2 miles outside of town," Mr. Williams said. "Very private. Margaret lived there until she got sick and had to move to the nursing home. The gas station owner seemed to know about it. He said the Blackwood family had a bad reputation." Mr. Williams stopped shuffling papers. He looked at Sarah with a strange expression. "Old small towns always have gossip, Miss Chen. I wouldn't pay attention to rumors." But Sarah noticed that he did not say the rumors were false. He just said, not to pay attention to them. After signing all the papers, Mr. Williams gave her the keys to the house and directions to find it. As she left his office, Sarah felt excited and nervous at the same time. In just a few minutes, she would see her new home. Sarah drove slowly down the dirt road that led to her new house. The trees on both sides were tall and thick, blocking out most of the afternoon light. After about a mile, the trees opened up, and Sarah saw the house for the first time. She stopped the car and stared. The house was huge, much bigger than she had expected. It was 3 stories tall with dark gray stone walls and tall windows. The roof had many points and angles, like something from an old movie. 2 tall towers rose up from each end of the house. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered to herself. The house looked like it belonged to a rich family from 100 years ago. Sarah had expected something normal, maybe a regular old house with 2 or 3 bedrooms. This looked like a mansion where kings and queens might live. She drove up the long driveway that curved around a big fountain. The fountain was dry and filled with dead leaves. Weeds grew through cracks in the stone driveway. Everything looked like it had been empty for a very long time. Sarah parked in front of the main door and got out of the car. The wind was cold, and she pulled her jacket tight around her. The house seemed even bigger up close. The front door was made of heavy dark wood with metal decorations. She put the key in the lock, and it turned easily. The door opened with a loud creak that echoed through the house. Sarah stepped inside and looked around. The front hall was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Sarah had to tilt her head back to see it. A grand staircase curved up to the 2nd floor. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, but Sarah could see that the house had once been very beautiful. She found a light switch and flipped it. Nothing happened. She tried several more switches before she remembered that the electricity had probably been turned off years ago. She was glad she had brought a flashlight in her bag. The beam of her flashlight showed her amazing things. The walls were covered with dark wood panels. Beautiful paintings hung everywhere, though they were hard to see through the dust and darkness. Furniture sat in every room, still in the same places where people had left them 20 years ago. In the dining room, Sarah found a long table set for dinner. Plates, cups, and silverware sat on the table as if a family had just stepped away, for a moment. But the food was long gone and everything was covered in dust and spiderwebs. The kitchen was huge, with old-fashioned appliances and a big stone fireplace. Sarah found candles in the drawers and lit several of them. The warm light made the kitchen feel less scary, but also showed her how much work the house would need. Upstairs, Sarah found bedroom after bedroom. Each one was fully furnished with beds, dressers, and chairs. In one room, she found children's toys scattered on the floor. A doll sat in a small chair, staring at Sarah with glass eyes that seemed too real in the candlelight. The master bedroom was the biggest room Sarah had ever seen. The bed was enormous with tall posts and heavy curtains. When Sarah opened the closet, she found it full of old clothes. Women's dresses, men's suits, and children's clothes all hung there as if the family had just gone on vacation and would be back soon. Sarah chose a smaller bedroom for herself and brought in her bag from the car. She found sheets in a closet and made the bed. The sheets smelled old but clean. As the sun set, the house became very dark. Sarah lit more candles and tried to make herself comfortable. She found some canned food in the kitchen and ate a cold dinner. The silence in the house was complete. Sarah was used to living in the city, where there were always sounds of cars and people. Here she could hear nothing but the wind outside and the old house creaking. Around 10 o'clock, Sarah decided to go to bed. She was tired from the long drive and all the excitement. She blew out most of the candles, keeping just one burning on the table next to her bed. She lay in the big old bed and listened to the sounds of the house. Old houses make noise, she told herself. The wood expands and contracts. The wind makes things creak. These are normal sounds. But around midnight, Sarah heard something that did not sound normal. Footsteps. They were coming from upstairs, directly above her room. Slow, steady footsteps, like someone pacing back and forth across the floor. Sarah lay very still and listened. The footsteps were definitely real. Someone was walking around upstairs, but that was impossible. Sarah had checked every room in the house. She was alone. The footsteps continued for about 10 minutes, always following the same path. Sarah could hear them start at one end of the room above, walk across to the other end, turn around and walk back, over and over. Sarah tried to think of explanations. Maybe it was a tree branch hitting the roof. Maybe it was mice or rats running around. But the sounds were too regular, too much like footsteps. Finally, the sounds stopped. Sarah waited for a long time, but they did not start again. She told herself she had imagined it. Old houses make strange noises. She was tired and nervous about being in a new place. But just as she was starting to fall asleep, she smelled something strange. Perfume. Sweet, flowery perfume, like the kind old ladies wear. Sarah sat up in bed and sniffed the air. The smell was definitely there, and it was getting stronger. But where was it coming from? She had not found any perfume bottles in the house, and the smell had not been there when she went to bed. She got out of bed and walked around the room with her candle. The smell seemed to move with her, always just at the edge of what she could detect. When she opened the bedroom door, the smell got stronger. Sarah stepped into the hallway. The perfume smell was much stronger here. It seemed to be coming from upstairs, from the same area where she had heard the footsteps. She stood at the bottom of the stairs that led to the third floor and looked up into the darkness. The smell of perfume was very strong now. Sarah knew she should go back to her room and ignore it. But she had to know what was causing these strange things. She started walking up the stairs. Each step creaked loudly under her feet. The perfume smell got stronger with every step. At the top of the stairs, Sarah found herself in a long hallway with doors on both sides. She walked slowly down the hall, checking each room. Most of them were empty except for old furniture. But at the end of the hall, she found a room that was different. This room had clearly belonged to a woman. There was a beautiful dressing table with a large mirror. Bottles of perfume sat on the table along with jewelry boxes and makeup containers. The bed was made with lace pillows and a pink bedspread. Sarah walked over to the dressing table and picked up one of the perfume bottles. When she opened it, the same sweet smell filled the air. This was where the smell was coming from. But the bottle had been closed when she found it, and she was sure the smell had not been in the house earlier. How had the perfume gotten into the air? Sarah looked at herself in the mirror. In the candlelight, she looked pale and scared. Behind her reflection, she thought she saw movement. She spun around, but the room was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, something was written in the dust on the glass. Words that had not been there a moment before. Get out while you can. Sarah dropped the candle. It went out when it hit the floor, leaving her in complete darkness. She fumbled for her flashlight and turned it on. When the beam hit the mirror, the words were gone. The dust on the mirror looked smooth and undisturbed. Sarah ran from the room and down the stairs as fast as she could. She did not stop until she was back in her bedroom with the door locked. She sat on the bed, breathing hard and trying to understand what had just happened. Maybe she had imagined the words on the mirror. Maybe the stress of the day and the strange house were making her see things. But the footsteps and the perfume smell had been real. She was sure of that. Sarah did not sleep much that night. Every small sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like a person moving in the darkness. When morning finally came, she was relieved to see sunlight coming through the windows. In the daylight, the house looked less scary. It was still old and dusty, but it looked like a normal house where normal people had once lived. Sarah almost convinced herself that she had imagined everything from the night before. But when she went to the kitchen to make coffee, she found something that made her blood run cold. On the kitchen table, someone had set out a cup and saucer. Steam was rising from the cup, as if someone had just poured hot tea. Sarah was the only person in the house. She was sure of that. So who had made the tea? Sarah stared at the steaming cup of tea on the kitchen table. Her hands shook as she reached toward it, then pulled back. The tea was hot, fresh, as if someone had just made it. But Sarah was alone in the house. She was sure of that. She looked around the kitchen carefully. All the cabinets were closed. The stove was cold. There was no sign that anyone had been cooking or making tea. But the cup sat there, impossible to ignore. Sarah decided she needed to get out of the house for a while. The strange things from last night and now this teacup were making her feel crazy. She needed to talk to normal people and do normal things. She drove back into Millbrook and parked on Main Street. The town looked different in the daylight. It was small and quiet with only a few shops and restaurants. Most of the buildings were old, and some looked empty. Sarah's first stop was the grocery store. She needed food if she was going to stay in the house for a few days. The store was small and dark with narrow aisles and old shelves. A young man with red hair stood behind the cash register. When Sarah walked in, he smiled and said hello. She filled a basket with bread, milk, eggs, and other basic foods. "You're new in town," the cashier said as he rang up her items. "Yes, I just inherited a house here," Sarah said. "The Blackwood place." The cashier's smile disappeared immediately. He stopped scanning her items and stared at her. "The Blackwood mansion? You're going to live there?" "Well, I'm not sure yet. I'm just looking at it to decide what to do." The cashier finished scanning her food quickly, like he wanted her to leave as soon as possible. "That'll be $42, he said, not looking at her. "Is there something wrong with the house?" Sarah asked. "I don't know anything about it," the cashier said quickly. "I just know it's been empty for a long time." Sarah paid for her groceries and asked about getting the electricity turned on at the house. The cashier gave her a phone number but would not look her in the eye. "Can someone deliver groceries to the house if I need them?" Sarah asked. The cashier shook his head quickly. "No, sorry. We don't deliver out there. But you deliver to other places in town, right?" "Yeah, but not to that house. Company policy." Sarah left the grocery store feeling confused. What kind of company policy would keep them from delivering to one specific house? And why had the cashier acted so strange when she mentioned the Blackwood name? Her next stop was the post office. She needed to set up mail forwarding from her apartment. The post office was a small building next to the bank. An older woman with gray hair sat behind the counter. "I need to set up mail service for the Blackwood house," Sarah told her. The woman looked up sharply. The Blackwood place? That house has been closed for over 20 years. I know. I just inherited it. I'm Sarah Chen. The woman stared at her for a long moment. You're going to live there? Maybe, I haven't decided yet. The woman shook her head slowly. Honey, that's not a place for living. That's a place for... Well, it's just not for living. What do you mean? Nothing. Forget I said anything. But listen, if you decide you want mail delivery, you'll have to set up a P.O. box here in town. Our mail carriers won't go to that house. Why not? They just won't, that's all. Sarah was getting frustrated. Everyone in this town seemed to know something about her house that they would not tell her. Can you at least tell me why everyone acts so strange when I mention the Blackwood name? The woman looked around the empty post office like she was worried someone might hear her. Then she leaned forward and whispered, Some families in this town have long memories. The Blackwood family. They weren't good people. That's all I'm going to say. Sarah left the post office more confused than ever. She decided to try the diner she had seen on Main Street. Maybe she could get some lunch and learn more about the town. The diner was small and old-fashioned, with red booths and a long counter. Only a few people were eating lunch, all of them older. When Sarah walked in, conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at her. Sarah sat in a booth near the window. An older waitress with curly brown hair came over with a menu. You're not from around here, the waitress said. It was not a question. No, I'm from the city. I just inherited some property here. What property? Sarah was getting tired of this reaction, but she answered anyway. The Blackwood house. The waitress dropped the menu. It hit the floor with a loud slap that made everyone in the diner look over. You inherited the Blackwood place? The waitress said loudly. Now everyone in the diner was definitely staring. Sarah felt her face turn red. Yes, is there a problem with that? The waitress picked up the menu with shaking hands. No problem, what would you like to eat? Sarah ordered a sandwich and coffee. While she waited for her food, she noticed that people kept looking at her and whispering to each other. She heard the name Blackwood several times. When the waitress brought her sandwich, Sarah tried again. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm Margaret Blackwood's great-niece. I know who you are, the waitress said quietly. Word travels fast in a small town. Can you tell me why everyone gets so upset when I mention that house? The waitress looked around the diner. Most of the other customers had finished eating and left. Only one old man remained, sitting at the counter. Honey, the waitress said, in a low voice. That house has a bad history. Really bad. Most people in this town wish it would just fall down. What kind of bad history? The kind that's better left buried. The Blackwood family did things, terrible things. That house was the center of it all. Sarah leaned forward. What kind of terrible things? Before the waitress could answer, the old man at the counter stood up and walked over to their booth. He was tall and thin, with white hair and cold blue eyes. Ruth, he said to the waitress, I think you've said enough. The waitress, Ruth, looked scared. I was just making conversation, Mr. Harrison. No, you are gossiping about things that are none of your business, and certainly none of her business. The old man looked down at Sarah. Miss Chen, I suggest you sell that house as quickly as possible and go back where you came from. This town doesn't need outsiders stirring up old problems. Sarah felt angry. I have every right to be here. I inherited that property legally. Legal and smart are two different things, Mr. Harrison said. That house should have been torn down years ago. If you're smart, you'll put it up for sale and never come back. And if I don't? Mr. Harrison stared at her for a long moment. Then you might find out why it should have been torn down. The old man walked back to the counter, left money for his coffee, and walked out of the diner. Ruth, the waitress, looked nervous. Don't mind him, Ruth said quietly. He's lived here his whole life. He remembers things from when he was young. What things? Ruth looked toward the door where Mr. Harrison had left. Things that happened in that house. Bad things. People got hurt, some people. Well, some people never came back. What do you mean, never came back? I can't talk about it anymore, Ruth said quickly. I've already said too much. But honey, please listen to me. That house is not safe. I don't mean the building is going to fall down. I mean it's not safe for you to be there. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to warn you, there's a difference. Ruth walked away before Sarah could ask any more questions. Sarah finished her sandwich in silence, thinking about what everyone had told her. Bad history, terrible things, people who never came back. After lunch, Sarah decided to try one more place. She had seen a hardware store down the street. Maybe she could hire someone to help fix up the house. The hardware store was dusty and crowded with tools and supplies. An older man with a beard stood behind the counter. I need to hire someone to do some basic repairs on a house, Sarah told him. What house? Sarah sighed. The Blackwood house. The man's friendly expression disappeared. No. No what? No, we don't work on that house. Nobody does. But you don't even know what kind of work I need. Doesn't matter. We don't go to that house. None of the contractors in town will go there. Why not? Because we're not stupid, the man said bluntly. That place is cursed. Has been for 70 years. Cursed? Come on, you don't really believe that. The man leaned across the counter. Miss, I've lived in this town for 60 years. I know what I'm talking about. Bad things happen to people who spend too much time in that house. If you're smart, you'll sell it to someone who lives far away and never look back. What if I offer to pay double your normal rates? You could offer 10 times the normal rate, and I still wouldn't set foot in that place. And neither would anyone else in this town. Sarah left the hardware store feeling frustrated and a little scared. Every person she had talked to had warned her about the house. Some had been nice about it, others had been rude, but they all said the same thing: get away from the Blackwood house. As she drove back to the house, Sarah tried to think logically about what she had learned. Small towns always have gossip and rumors. Maybe the Blackwood family had been unpopular for some normal reason. Maybe they had been snobbish or unfriendly. Over the years, the stories had probably grown and changed until the family seemed much worse than they really were. But as Sarah pulled into the driveway of the mansion, she remembered the footsteps, the perfume, and the cup of tea that had appeared from nowhere. Maybe the people in town knew something she did not know. Sarah followed the wet footprints up the stairs, her heart beating fast. The watermarks were clear on the old wooden steps. Someone with wet shoes had walked through her house while she was in town. But who? And how had they gotten in? The footprints led down the second-floor hallway and stopped at the door to the master bedroom. Sarah pushed the door open slowly. The room looked exactly the same as before, but she could smell dampness in the air. She checked every window in the room. They were all locked from the inside. She looked in the closet and under the bed. No one was there. But the smell of dampness was stronger near the bathroom. In the bathroom, Sarah found more water on the floor around the old bathtub. The tub was dry, but water dripped from the faucet. When Sarah turned the handle, nothing happened. The water had been turned off to the house years ago. So where had the water come from? Sarah spent the next hour checking every room in the house. She found no sign that anyone had broken in. All the doors and windows were locked, but the water and the footprints were real. She had not imagined them. That evening, Sarah decided to explore more of the house. She had only seen the main rooms and bedrooms. A house this big must have other areas she had not found yet. She took a flashlight and started in the basement. The stairs down were narrow and creaky. The basement was large and dark, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Sarah could see an old furnace in one corner and shelves along the walls. As she walked around the basement, shining her light into corners, she noticed something strange about one of the walls. Behind the old furnace, there was a section of wall that looked different from the rest. Sarah moved closer and examined it with her flashlight. This part of the wall was made of bricks, while the rest of the basement had stone walls. The bricks looked newer, too. The mortar between them was a different color. It looked like someone had bricked up a doorway. Sarah ran her hands over the bricks. Some of them were loose. The mortar crumbled when she touched it. With a little work, She might be able to remove some of the bricks and see what was behind them. She went back upstairs and found tools in a closet near the kitchen. The previous owners had left behind hammers, screwdrivers, and other equipment. Sarah took a small hammer and a chisel and went back to the basement. She started working on the loose bricks at the edge of the bricked-up area. The mortar was old and cracked, and pieces came away easily. After an hour of careful work, Sarah had removed enough bricks to create a small hole. She shined her flashlight through the hole and gasped. There was a room behind the wall, a hidden room that someone had sealed up years ago. Sarah worked faster, removing more bricks until the hole was big enough for her to climb through. She shined her light around the hidden room before going in. The room was smaller than she had expected, but it was packed with things. Wooden boxes were stacked against the walls. Filing cabinets stood in the corners. A desk sat in the middle of the room with papers scattered across its surface. Sarah climbed through the hole and into the secret room. The air smelled musty and old. She walked over to the desk and picked up some of the papers. They were letters and documents with official-looking letterheads. One letter was addressed to Dr. Edmund Blackwood from something called the Department of Medical Research. Another paper had the title, The Millbrook Project, Progress Report Tonner 15. Sarah's hands shook as she read the first letter. Dr. Blackwood, we are pleased with the progress of the Millbrook Project. The subjects you have selected show promising responses to the new treatments. Please continue with Phase 2 and send us your reports monthly. The letter was dated 1952. Sarah opened one of the wooden boxes. Inside, she found photographs. Black and white pictures of people in what looked like a hospital or laboratory, but something was wrong with the pictures. The people in them looked scared and confused. Some were strapped to beds or chairs. In one photo, Sarah saw a man in a white coat standing next to a young woman who was tied to a chair. The woman's eyes were wide with fear. The man was smiling. At the bottom of the photo, someone had written, Subject No. 47, Day 3. Sarah's stomach felt sick. She opened another box and found more photographs, all similar to the first ones. People who looked like patients, but they were clearly being held against their will. She found a filing cabinet and opened the top drawer. It was full of folders, with numbers instead of names. Subject number 1, subject number 2, and so on. Sarah pulled out a random folder and opened it. Inside was a handwritten report about someone called Subject No. 23. The report described giving this person injections of unknown chemicals and recording their reactions. The person had become sick and disoriented. The final entry in the file said simply, Subject number 23, deceased, day 12. Sarah dropped the folder. The papers scattered across the floor. She grabbed another folder from the cabinet. This one was labeled Subject No. 31 and contained similar reports. Injections, strange drugs, and observations about how the person reacted. Many of the files ended the same way, deceased or transferred to location unknown. Sarah found a thick notebook on the desk and opened it. It was a journal written by Dr. Edmund Blackwood himself. The first entry was dated January 1951. The government has approved our research proposal. We will have access to subjects from the state hospital and orphanage. This is a wonderful opportunity to advance medical science and help our country's defense efforts. Sarah read more entries. Dr. Blackwood was conducting experiments on people who could not say no. Mental patients, orphans, homeless people. He was giving them drugs and treatments that had never been tested safely. One entry made Sarah feel sick. Subject number 12 showed interesting results with the new serum. Complete memory loss after only 3 injections. Subject appears unable to remember their own name or family. This could be very useful for our military applications. Another entry was even worse. Lost 2 more subjects this week. The new chemical mixture is stronger than expected, but the surviving subjects show remarkable changes in brain function. I believe we are close to a breakthrough. Sarah kept reading, even though each entry made her feel worse. Dr. Blackwood had been using the mansion as a secret laboratory. The government was paying him to experiment on helpless people. Many of those people had died. She found a ledger book that listed all the subjects by number. There were over 100 names. No, Not names. Numbers. Over 100 people had been brought to this house and used for experiments. Most of the entries ended with D or T. Sarah found a note that explained the codes. D meant deceased. T meant transferred. She could not find any explanation for where the transferred people had gone. In the back of the ledger, Sarah found a list of names. Real names, not just numbers. These seemed to be the people who had helped Dr. Blackwood with his work. Local people from Millbrook. She recognized some of the names from her visit to town that day. Harrison was on the list. So was Williams, the lawyer who had given her the house keys. These families had known what was happening in the mansion. Some of their relatives had helped with the experiments. Sarah found a box of photographs from the town. Pictures of Dr. Blackwood shaking hands with local officials. Photos of trucks bringing people to the mansion late at night. Pictures of the same trucks leaving empty. One photograph showed a group of men in suits standing in front of the mansion. The caption read, "Millbrook Project Staff, 1953. Dr. Blackwood was in the center of the group, smiling. Around him were a dozen other men, including some who looked like they could be the grandfathers of people Sarah had met in town. Now Sarah understood why everyone in Millbrook wanted her to leave. This was not just old gossip or family feuds. The people in town knew that terrible things had happened in this house. Some of their own families had been involved. Dr. Blackwood had not worked alone. He had needed help from local people to find subjects and keep the experiments secret. The whole town had been part of the conspiracy, and now Sarah was living in the house where it had all happened. She found more documents that explained what had happened to end the project. In 1955, someone from the government had come to inspect the work. They had found serious problems with Dr. Blackwood's methods. The project was shut down immediately. Dr. Blackwood had been ordered to destroy all his records and never speak about the work again. But instead of destroying the evidence, he had hidden it in this secret room and sealed it up. Sarah sat on the floor of the hidden room, surrounded by boxes of evidence. She felt sick and scared. All those people who had been brought to this house, all the experiments and torture that had happened here. No wonder the house felt strange. No wonder she heard footsteps and smelled perfume and found mysterious cups of tea. If ghosts were real, this house would be full of them. But Sarah also felt angry. The people in town knew about this history. They had spent 70 years keeping it secret. The families of Dr. Blackwood's victims had never learned what happened to their relatives. This was not just old history that should be forgotten. This was evidence of crimes, murder, torture, government cover-ups. Sarah made a decision. She was not going to sell the house and leave town like everyone wanted. She was going to expose the truth about what had happened here. But first, she needed to get all this evidence somewhere safe. If the people in town had kept this secret for 70 years, Sarah pressed herself against the basement wall, holding the documents tight against her chest. Mr. Harrison's footsteps echoed in the dark basement as he searched for her. "Miss Chen, I know you're scared, but there's no need to be. I just want to talk," Mr. Harrison said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "You've discovered something that happened a long time ago, something that's better left alone." Sarah saw his flashlight beam moving across the basement. She stayed very still, hoping he would not see her in the shadows near the old furnace. "My grandfather worked with Dr. Blackwood," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice getting closer. "So did many other families in this town. It was a different time back then. The country was afraid of enemies. The government asked us to help with important research." The light from his flashlight was getting closer to where Sarah was hiding. She looked around desperately for a way to escape. "We didn't know how bad things would get," Mr. Harrison said. "Dr. Blackwood told us he was helping sick people. He said the government was working on new medicines that could save lives." Sarah saw the beam of light stop on the hole she had made in the wall. Mr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Ah," he said softly. "So you found the hidden room. I was afraid of that." Sarah heard his footsteps moving toward the hole in the wall. This was her chance. While he was looking at the secret room, she could try to get to the stairs. She moved as quietly as possible along the wall, heading toward the basement stairs. But just as she reached them, she heard Mr. Harrison's voice behind her. "Going somewhere? Miss Chen?" Sarah ran up the stairs as fast as she could. Behind her she heard Mr. Harrison following, but he was old and could not move as quickly as she could. She reached the main floor and ran toward the front door. But when she got there, she found it was locked. Not just locked with the regular lock, but with a heavy chain that had not been there before. Sarah ran to the back door. It was also chained shut. Someone had locked her inside the house. "Miss Chen?" Mr. Harrison called from the basement stairs. "There's no point in running. The house is secured. Let's just sit down and have a civilized conversation." Sarah ran upstairs to the second floor. Maybe she could get out through one of the windows. But when she tried to open them, she found they had been nailed shut from the outside. She was trapped. Mr. Harrison appeared at the top of the stairs, breathing hard from the climb. "Please, Miss Chen, you're making this much more difficult than it needs to be." Sarah backed away from him, still holding the documents. "You can't keep me here. People will look for me." "What people?" Mr. Harrison asked. "You told everyone in Nay town that you were just visiting. You don't have family nearby. Your friend thinks you're just taking a weekend trip to see an old house." Sarah realized he was right. No one would miss her for days, maybe weeks, and by then it would be too late. "Now," Mr. Harrison said, sitting down in an old chair, "let me tell you the real story of what happened in this house. Then maybe you'll understand why we've kept it secret for so long." Sarah stayed standing, ready to run if she got the chance. But Mr. Harrison seemed relaxed, like he had all the time in the world. "In 1951, the government came to our town with a proposition," he began. "They were working on medical research that could help win the Cold War. They needed a place to do secret experiments, and they needed local people to help. They asked Dr. Blackwood to run the project because he was a respected doctor. They offered to pay the town a lot of money. Money we badly needed. The Depression had hit Millbrook hard, and many families were struggling." Sarah listened, but she did not feel sorry for them. "So you helped them torture innocent people for money?" "We didn't know it would be torture," Mr. Harrison said, but his voice sounded less sure. "Dr. Blackwood said he was testing new medicines. He said the subjects were volunteers who wanted to help their country. But they weren't volunteers, were they?" Mr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "No, they weren't. Dr. Blackwood lied to us about that. The people brought to this house were mental patients, orphans, homeless people. People who had no families to ask questions about them. And when you found out the truth, you kept helping anyway. By then, it was too late to stop. The government made it clear that if we talked about the project, we would all go to prison. Our whole town would be destroyed. Families would be ruined." Sarah felt sick. "So you chose to protect yourselves instead of the people being tortured in this house." "We didn't have a choice," Mr. Harrison said, getting angry. "You don't understand what it was like back then. The government had unlimited power. If we had tried to stop them, they would have destroyed us and found another town to do the work." "There's always a choice," Sarah said. "You could have contacted newspapers. You could have told the police in other towns. The newspapers were controlled by the government. The police couldn't do anything against federal agents. Miss Chen, you're young. You don't understand how powerless regular people were against the government in those days." Mr. Harrison stood up and walked closer to Sarah. "The project lasted for 4 years. Over 100 people were brought to this house. Most of them died from the experiments. The ones who didn't die were taken away to other facilities. And you just watched it happen. We tried not to watch. We tried not to know. But yes, we let it happen. And when it was over, we agreed to keep it secret forever." "Why?" "The project was over. Dr. Blackwood was gone. Why not tell the truth then?" "Because the truth would have destroyed our town," Mr. Harrison said. "People would have blamed us for what happened. No one would have believed that we were forced to help. We would have been seen as monsters." Sarah looked at the documents in her hands. "Maybe you were monsters." Mr. Harrison's face got hard. "We were survivors. We did what we had to do to protect our families and our community. And now you want me to help you keep covering it up. Yes, that's exactly what I want. Sarah shook her head. I won't do it. This information needs to come out. The families of those victims deserve to know what happened to their relatives. Those families are dead, Miss Chen. This happened 70 years ago. Most of the victims' relatives have been dead for decades. Telling this story now won't help anyone. It will help the truth. The truth? Mr. Harrison laughed bitterly. The truth is that terrible things happened here. The truth is that good. People were forced to do bad things by a government that didn't care about individual lives. The truth is that revealing this story will hurt the innocent descendants of the people who were involved. And what about the innocent victims who died in this house? They're dead, Miss Chen. They've been dead for 70 years. Nothing we do now can help them. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. She thought about all the people whose files she had read in the hidden room. Subject number 23 who had died after 12 days of experiments. Subject number 31 who had lost their memory and never recovered. Subject number 47 who had been strapped to a chair while doctors injected them with unknown chemicals. They deserve justice, she said quietly. Justice, Mr. Harrison said. Dr. Blackwood is dead. The government officials who ran the project are dead. Most of the local people who helped are dead. Who are you going to punish? The grandchildren of people who were forced to cooperate 70 years ago? Sarah thought about the lawyer, Mr. Williams, whose grandfather had helped with the project. She thought about the families in town who were still keeping the secret. Maybe Mr. Harrison was right that punishing them wouldn't bring back the victims. But keeping the secret wasn't right either. The truth needs to come out, Sarah said again. Maybe we can't punish anyone, but people deserve to know what happened. And what good will that do? It will destroy our town. It will ruin families. It will cause pain and suffering for people who had nothing to do with the original crimes. Sometimes the truth causes pain. That doesn't mean we should hide it, Mr. Harrison sighed. Miss Chen, I can see that you're determined to do what you think is right, but I can't let you destroy my community to satisfy your sense of justice. What are you going to do, keep me locked in this house forever? No, I'm going to make you an offer, a very generous offer. Mr. Harrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. This is a contract to sell the house and all its contents to the Millbrook Historical Society for $500,000. Sarah's eyes got wide. 500,000? That's 10 times what the house is worth. You could pay off your student loans, buy a new house, start a new life. All you have to do is sign this contract and promise never to speak about what you found in the basement. Sarah looked at the contract. $500,000 was more money than she had ever imagined having. It would solve all her financial problems. She could quit her job at the grocery store and do whatever she wanted with her life. But it would mean letting the truth stay buried forever. What if I refuse? She asked. Mr. Harrison's face became very serious. Then I'm afraid you'll have an accident, a very tragic accident. Old houses can be dangerous places, especially houses with hidden rooms and unstable foundations. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're threatening to kill me. I'm telling you the truth about what happens to people who threaten this community. We've kept this secret for 70 years, Miss Chen. We've done whatever was necessary to protect it. Sarah looked at the pen in Mr. Harrison's hand. $500,000 for her silence, or death if she refused. But she thought about all the victims whose files she had read, and she knew what she had to do. I need time to think about this, she said. Mr. Harrison smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. Of course, this is a big decision. I'll give you until tomorrow morning to decide. And if I try to leave? You won't be able to leave until you make your choice. The house is secured, and we'll be watching all the roads out of town. Mr. Harrison walked toward the stairs. I'll come back tomorrow at 10 o'clock for your answer. I hope you make the smart choice, Miss Chen. After he left, Sarah heard the sound of chains being locked on the doors again. She was trapped in the house with the evidence of terrible crimes and a deadline to decide between money and truth. Sarah spent the night planning. She could not get out of the house, but maybe she could find a way to get the information out. She found an old computer in Dr. Blackwood's study, but it was too old to connect to the internet. The phone lines had been cut. But then Sarah remembered something. In the basement, she had seen old radio equipment, amateur radio that might still work. She went back to the hidden room and gathered more documents, taking pictures of the most important pages with her phone. Then she went to look for the radio equipment. In a back room of the basement, she found it, an old ham radio setup that looked like it had not been used in years. Sarah's father had been interested in radios when she was young, so she knew a little about how they worked. It took her several hours to figure out how to turn on the equipment and tune it properly. Finally, around 3 in the morning, she managed to make contact with another radio operator. "This is emergency traffic," Sarah said into the microphone. "I need help getting information to the authorities." The voice that answered was scratchy, but clear. "This is K9TXR. What's your emergency?" Sarah quickly explained her situation. She was trapped in a house in Millbrook by people who wanted to cover up evidence of old crimes. She needed someone to contact the FBI or the state police. "I have documents that prove the government conducted illegal medical experiments here in the 1950s, she said. "Over 100 people were tortured and killed. The local community has been covering it up ever since." The radio operator, who said his name was Dave, promised to contact the authorities immediately. Sarah gave him her exact location and told him to hurry. "They're coming back in the morning to force me to sign a document," she said. "If I don't agree to keep quiet, they'll kill me." "Help is coming," Dave assured her. "Keep this radio channel open." Sarah stayed by the radio for the rest of the night, talking to Dave and other radio operators who joined the conversation. Word was spreading through the amateur radio network about the situation in Millbrook. At dawn, Sarah heard cars pulling into the driveway. She looked out the window and saw several vehicles. Mr. Harrison was back, but he was not alone. She counted, at least 6 other men. Sarah went back to the radio. "They're here," she told Dave. "Multiple vehicles, multiple people. The FBI is on their way," Dave said. "They should be there within the hour. Try to stall for time." Sarah heard the chains being removed from the front door, then footsteps in the house. "Miss Chen?" Mr. Harrison called. "Time for our meeting," Sarah came upstairs with the documents in her arms. Mr. Harrison was waiting in the living room with the other men. She recognized some of them from town, including Mr. Williams, the lawyer. "I see you brought friends," Sarah said. "These are the other families involved in keeping our communities secret," Mr. Harrison said. "We all have a stake in your decision." Mr. Williams stepped forward. "Miss Chen, we've discussed your situation, and we've improved our offer. We're prepared to pay you $1 million for the house and your silence." Sarah's breath caught. $1 million was more money than she could spend in a lifetime. But she thought about the radio conversation and help coming soon. "That's very generous," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I have some questions first." "What questions?" "I want to understand exactly what happened here. The documents I found tell part of the story, but I want to hear it from people who know the truth." The men looked at each other. Mr. Harrison nodded. "Very well. If it will help you make the right decision, we'll tell you everything." Another man, who looked about 70 years old, spoke up. "My name is Tom Bradley. My father was the sheriff here in the 1950s. He was the one who helped bring the subjects to the house." "How did they choose the victims?" Sarah asked. "Dr. Blackwood gave my father a list of the kind of people they needed," Tom said. "Mental patients who had no family visitors, orphans who had aged out of the system, homeless people who wouldn't be missed. My father would find these people in other towns and bring them here," Tom continued. "He told them they were being taken to a new hospital or care facility. They came willingly because they thought they were getting help." Sarah felt sick. "And your father was okay with lying to these people?" "My father was told they would be getting medical treatment that would help them. Dr. Blackwood convinced everyone that the experiments would make the subjects' lives better, even after people started dying." Tom looked down at the floor. "By then, my father was in too deep to back out. The government agents made it clear that anyone who tried to quit the project would be arrested for treason." Another man spoke up. My grandfather owned the funeral home. He was responsible for disposing of the bodies when subjects died. How many bodies? Sarah asked. 73, the man said quietly. 73 people died during the 4 years of the project. Sarah had seen the number in Dr. Blackwood's records, but hearing it spoken out loud made it feel more real. 73 people had died horrible deaths in this house. What happened to the people who didn't die? Transferred to other facilities, Mr. Harrison said. We never found out where. The government took them away, and we never saw them again. Some of them were in very bad condition when they left, Tom added. Brain damage from the experiments. Some couldn't speak anymore. Some didn't seem to remember who they were. Sarah thought about the files she had read, subject after subject, whose minds had been destroyed by Dr. Blackwood's experiments. And, when the project ended, you all agreed to keep it secret? We had no choice, Mr. Williams said. The government made us sign documents promising never to speak about what we had seen. They said if we ever talked, we would be charged with being accessories to murder. But you weren't accessories, Sarah said. You were forced to help. Try explaining that to a jury, Mr. Harrison said. Try explaining that to the families of the victims. We were local people who helped bring victims to this house. Even if we were forced to do it, people would blame us. So you decided to protect yourselves instead of seeking justice for the victims. We decided to protect our families and our community, Tom said. Revealing the truth wouldn't bring back the people who died. It would only destroy the lives of innocent people who had nothing to do with the crimes. What about the people you've killed since then to keep the secret? The room got very quiet. The men looked at each other nervously. That was unfortunate, Mr. Harrison said finally. But necessary. How many? Over the years, maybe a dozen. Mostly people who stumbled onto information about the project. A few reporters who got too close to the truth. Sarah couldn't believe how casually he talked about murder. And you think that's justified? We think it's necessary to protect hundreds of innocent families in this community. Sarah heard the sound of cars on the road outside. A lot of cars, moving fast. She hoped it was the FBI. What about Ruth, the waitress? Why did you kill her? Ruth was getting old and starting to talk too much, Mr. Harrison said. She was becoming a risk to the community. She was trying to warn me. Exactly. She was putting our secret in danger. The sound of cars was getting closer. Sarah could see flashing lights through the windows. Miss Chen, Mr. Williams said urgently, we need your decision now. Will you accept our offer and keep our secret? Sarah looked around the room at all the men who had spent 70 years covering up mass murder. Men who had killed innocent people to protect their community's reputation. The cars stopped outside the house. Sarah heard car doors slamming and people shouting. I've already made my decision, Sarah said. I told the FBI everything last night. The men's faces went white. Mr. Harrison grabbed Sarah's arm. What did you do? I used the old radio equipment to contact the outside world. The FBI has been listening to our conversation for the last hour. As if on cue, the front door burst open. Men in FBI jackets flooded into the house. Federal agents, everyone on the ground. The men from Millbrook looked around in panic. Some tried to run, but there were agents at all the exits. Sarah Chen? One of the agents called. Here, Sarah said, raising her hand. The agent came over to her. Are you all right, miss? I'm fine. The evidence is in the basement. I can show you where everything is hidden. As the FBI agents arrested the men from Millbrook, Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions. She was relieved to be safe, proud that she had done the right thing, but also sad about what would happen to the town. Mr. Harrison was right about one thing. Revealing the truth would hurt innocent people. The FBI agents spent 3 days at the mansion, carefully documenting everything Sarah had found in the hidden room. Agent Jennifer Martinez, who was leading the investigation, told Sarah that the evidence was some of the most complete documentation of illegal government experiments she had ever seen. Dr. Blackwood was very thorough, Agent Martinez said as they watched agents carry boxes of documents out of the basement. Most government projects like this destroyed their records when they were shut down. This is a historian's goldmine. What happens now? Sarah asked. We'll investigate everyone who was involved in the cover-up. The people we arrested will be charged with conspiracy and murder. The government will have to acknowledge what happened here and probably pay compensation to the victims' families. Will the whole story become public? Eventually, yes. This is too big to keep quiet. There will be congressional hearings, news investigations, probably books and movies about it. Sarah felt both relieved and worried. She had wanted the truth to come out, but she knew it would destroy the town of Millbrook. After the FBI finished their initial investigation, Sarah was allowed to stay in the mansion while they decided what to do with the property. She knew she would never feel comfortable living there permanently, but she wanted to make sure the victims' stories were preserved properly. The first news reports appeared a week after the arrests. Local TV stations covered the story of the FBI raid in Millbrook, but they did not have many details yet. The reports just said that federal agents had uncovered evidence of historical crimes related to government research. But word was spreading in Millbrook itself. Everyone in town knew that their secret was out. Sarah's first indication of trouble came when she tried to drive into town for groceries. Someone had put nails in the road leading to the mansion. All 4 of her tires were punctured. She called the FBI, and they sent agents to investigate. Agent Martinez told Sarah that they would post guards at the mansion, but Sarah said she would be fine for now. These people are scared, Agent Martinez said. They know their world is about to change forever, but they're not stupid enough to hurt you while we're actively investigating them. Agent Martinez was wrong. That night, someone threw rocks through several windows of the mansion. Sarah woke up to the sound of breaking glass. When she looked outside, she could see people running away in the darkness. The next morning, Sarah found that someone had spray-painted words on the side of the house, "Get out or die." Sarah called the FBI again, but the agents who came to investigate said there was not much they could do. "We can't guard you 24 hours a day," one agent said. "Maybe you should consider staying somewhere else until this investigation is finished." But Sarah did not want to leave. She felt responsible for protecting the victims' stories. If she left now, she was afraid the town might find a way to destroy the remaining evidence. The harassment continued and got worse. Someone cut the phone lines to the mansion. Sarah's cell phone mysteriously stopped working. When she drove to town, people followed her car and shouted at her. At the grocery store, the same young cashier who had been friendly before now glared at her with hatred. "You destroyed our town," he said as he rang up her food. "Hundreds of families will lose everything because of you." "I didn't destroy anything," Sarah said. "I just revealed the truth about what happened here." "The truth?" The cashier laughed bitterly. "The truth is that you're an outsider who came here and ruined the lives of good people. Good people don't cover up mass murder for 70 years. Those people were already dead. Nothing you do now will bring them back. But you're destroying the lives of people who are still alive." Sarah left the store feeling depressed. The cashier was young, probably in his 20s. He had not been alive when the experiments happened. He was not responsible for any of the crimes. But his life was being ruined because of what his grandparents or great-grandparents had done. The harassment escalated when the first major news story broke. A national television network had gotten hold of some of the FBI's preliminary findings. The story was on the evening news with the headline, "Government Cover-Up Exposed in Small Town." The news report showed footage of Millbrook and interviewed some residents. Most people refused to talk to reporters, but a few spoke anonymously about how the FBI investigation was destroying their community. "This happened 70 years ago," one person said, their voice disguised. "Everyone involved is dead. Why are we being punished for things we didn't do?" After the news story aired, the harassment turned dangerous. Someone shot out the windows of Sarah's car. When she went outside in the morning, she found that all 4 tires had been slashed again. This time, there was a note on her windshield. "Leave now, or you'll end up like the others." Sarah knew they meant the people who had been killed over the years to protect the town's secret. Ruth, the waitress, the reporters who had gotten too close to the truth, other people who had threatened to expose what happened in the mansion. That afternoon, Sarah discovered that someone had broken into the mansion while she was in town. Nothing was stolen, but furniture had been moved around and drawers had been searched. Someone was looking for something. Sarah realized they were probably looking for copies of the documents she had found. The FBI had taken the originals, but maybe the townspeople were worried that Sarah had kept copies. They were right to be worried. Sarah had photographed many of the most important documents with her phone before the FBI arrived. She had also hidden some papers in different parts of the house as insurance. That night, Sarah heard cars driving slowly past the mansion. They would drive by, stop for a few minutes, then drive away. This happened every hour or so throughout the night. Sarah was being watched constantly. The next morning, she found that someone had tried to break into the house during the night. There were scratches around the locks on the back door and marks where someone had tried to pry open a window. Sarah realized that the people of Millbrook were getting desperate. The national news attention was growing stronger every day. More reporters were coming to town. Congressional representatives were calling for investigations. The story was becoming too big for the town to control, and they blamed Sarah for all of it. 3 days later, Sarah woke up to find that someone had poisoned the well water at the mansion. When she tried to brush her teeth, the water tasted bitter and made her feel sick. She had to drive to town to buy bottled water. At the gas station, the elderly owner who had warned her about the house weeks ago now looked at her with pure hatred. "You should have listened to me," he said as she paid for the water. "I told you to sell that place and leave. Now look what you've done." "I did what was right," Sarah said. "Right?" The man laughed. "You call destroying an entire community right? There are 300 families in this town. Most of them had nothing to do with what happened 70 years ago. But they're all going to suffer because of your need to play hero." Sarah tried to explain that she just wanted justice for the victims, but the man would not listen. "Justice?" he said. "Where's the justice for the children who will grow up poor because their parents lose their jobs? Where's the justice for the elderly people who will lose their homes because the property values crash?" Sarah left the gas station feeling worse than ever. She knew the man was right about some things. Innocent people would suffer because of her decision to expose the truth. But she also knew that keeping the secret had required decades of lies and murder. The people of Millbrook had chosen to protect themselves instead of seeking justice for the victims. That choice had consequences. That night, the harassment turned violent. Sarah was awakened by the sound of breaking glass downstairs. Someone had thrown a large rock through the front window. Attached to the rock was a note. "Last warning. Leave tonight or die." Sarah called 911, but the local police took over an hour to respond. When they finally arrived, the officers seemed more annoyed with Sarah than concerned about the threats. "Miss Chen," one officer said, "maybe it would be better for everyone if you left town until this situation calms down. Someone just threatened to kill me, and you want me to leave? I'm just saying that your presence here is causing a lot of tension. People are upset. People are upset because their crimes are being exposed." The officer shrugged. "I wasn't here 70 years ago. I don't know what crimes you're talking about. I just know that a peaceful town is being torn apart, and it started when you arrived." After the police left, Sarah realized she could not count on local law enforcement for protection. The police were part of the community. They had families and friends who were being hurt by the investigation. They were not going to help her. Sarah spent the rest of the night awake, watching for more attackers. She kept all the lights on and stayed away from windows. Around 3 in the morning, she heard footsteps on the roof. Someone was walking around above her head, just like the first night she had stayed in the house. But this time, Sarah knew it was not a ghost. Someone was on the roof of the mansion. Sarah grabbed a flashlight and went outside to look. She could see a dark figure moving across the roof near one of the chimneys. The person seemed to be doing something to the chimney. Sarah shouted, "Hey, get down from there!" 3 months after Sarah first discovered the hidden room, she sat in a hearing room in Washington, D.C., facing a panel of congressmen and senators. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, and families of people who had disappeared in the 1950s. "Miss Chen," the committee chairman said, "please tell us in your own words what you found in the Blackwood mansion." Sarah looked out at the audience and saw faces full of hope and pain. These were the families of Dr. Blackwood's victims. For 70 years, they had wondered what happened to their relatives who had simply vanished one day. I found evidence of a secret government program that used innocent people as test subjects for dangerous medical experiments, Sarah said into the microphone. Over 100 people were brought to the mansion between 1951 and 1955. Most of them were never seen again. Sarah spent 2 hours describing what she had found in the hidden room. She showed the committee photographs, medical records, and Dr. Blackwood's personal journal. She told them about the town's conspiracy to keep the experiments secret. When she finished, the committee chairman asked, "Ms. Chen, do you believe the government should compensate the families of the victims?" "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "The government funded these experiments. They knew innocent people were being hurt. The families deserve compensation, and they deserve to know the truth about what happened to their relatives." After the hearing, Sarah was surrounded by family members of the victims. An elderly woman named Dorothy grabbed Sarah's hands. "My brother disappeared in 1953, Dorothy said with tears in her eyes. "He was only 19 years old. He had mental problems, and one day, the police said they were taking him to a better hospital. We never saw him again." Sarah looked through her notes. "What was your brother's name?" "Tommy. Tommy Rodriguez." Sarah found the name in Dr. Blackwood's records. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "According to the files, your brother was subject number 31. He died during the experiments." Dorothy started crying, but she squeezed Sarah's hands tighter. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for finally telling us the truth. For 70 years, we thought maybe he was still alive somewhere. Now we can finally grieve properly." Other families shared similar stories. Brothers, sisters, children who had vanished without explanation. Some had been told their relatives died in hospitals or accidents. Others had simply been told that their family members had moved away and never contacted them again. The files show that 27 people survived the experiments, Sarah told the families, but they were transferred to other facilities. The government might still have records of what happened to them. The congressional investigation continued for 6 months. FBI agents arrested dozens of people in Millbrook for their role in the cover-up. Some were charged with murder for killing people who had threatened to expose the secret over the years. Mr. Harrison, the old man who had threatened Sarah, was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Ruth the waitress. He was also charged with conspiracy in the deaths of 3 reporters and 2 federal investigators who had gotten too close to the truth over the decades. The lawyer, Mr. Williams, cooperated with investigators in exchange for a lighter sentence. He provided information about other government projects that had used similar methods in different locations. Millbrook was not the only place this happened, Agent Martinez told Sarah. "We're finding evidence of similar experiments in at least 12 other locations across the country." The government eventually acknowledged its role in the experiments and established a compensation fund for victims' families. Each family received $2 million and a formal apology from the president. But the investigation also revealed uncomfortable truths about how many people had known about the experiments and stayed silent. "Almost every family in Millbrook knew something," Agent Martinez said. "Maybe they didn't know the details, but they knew that people were being brought to the mansion and never leaving. They knew that their neighbors were being paid large amounts of money by the government, and they all chose to stay quiet. Most of them. A few people tried to speak up over the years, but they were either paid off or silenced permanently. The town of Millbrook never recovered from the scandal. Property values collapsed when the story became national news. Businesses closed. Young people moved away. Within 2 years, the population had dropped from 3,000 to less than 800. Sarah felt guilty about the town's destruction, but Agent Martinez reminded her that the consequences were the result of choices the townspeople had made decades earlier. "They chose to cover up mass murder," Agent Martinez said. "They chose to kill people who threatened to expose the truth. These consequences are the result of their own actions, not yours." Sarah decided to donate the mansion to a non-profit organization that worked with victims of government abuse. The organization converted the house into a memorial and research center. The Blackwood Memorial Center opened 2 years after Sarah's discovery. The hidden room in the basement was preserved exactly as Sarah had found it, with all of Dr. Blackwood's equipment and records on display. Visitors could read the victims' files and see photographs of the people who had died in the house. Each victim was honored with their real name and a brief biography, not just a number like in Dr. Blackwood's records. The memorial also included information about other government experiments that had used unwilling subjects. The center worked to identify more victims and help their families find closure. Sarah used her inheritance money to establish a fund that provided financial support to families of victims of illegal government experiments. The fund also supported research into preventing similar abuses in the future. She never returned to live in Millbrook, but she visited the Memorial Center several times a year to meet with families and researchers. On one visit, 3 years after her discovery, Sarah met with Dorothy Rodriguez, the woman whose brother had been killed in the experiments. "I come here every few months," Dorothy said as they walked through the memorial. "It helps me feel close to Tommy. For 70 years, I didn't even know where he died. Now I can visit the place where he spent his last days." They stopped in front of a wall that listed all the victims' names. Tommy Rodriguez was near the top of the list. "Do you ever regret exposing the truth?" Dorothy asked. "I know it caused a lot of pain for people in this town." Sarah thought about the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times. The truth had destroyed a community and hurt many innocent people, but it had also brought justice to victims and closure to their families. "Sometimes I wonder if there was a better way to handle it," Sarah said. "But I don't regret telling the truth. The people who died in this house deserved to have their stories told." "What about the people in Millbrook who lost everything?" "They lost everything because their community was built on a foundation of lies and murder. That was never sustainable. The truth was going to come out eventually." Dorothy nodded. "My family spent 70 years wondering what happened to Tommy. We had nightmares about him being lost and alone somewhere. Learning the truth was painful, but it was better than not knowing." As Sarah drove away from the Memorial Center that day, she thought about how much had changed since she first inherited the mansion. She had been a struggling grocery store clerk with no direction in her life. The discovery in the basement had thrust her into a world of government conspiracies, family secrets, and moral choices she had never imagined facing. The experience had changed her completely. She was no longer the uncertain young woman who had been afraid to take risks. She had learned that sometimes doing the right thing required courage, even when the consequences were painful. Sarah now worked as an investigative researcher, helping other families uncover government cover-ups and corporate crimes. She had found her purpose in life by accident, but it felt like exactly what she was meant to do. The Blackwood mansion still stood on the hill outside what remained of Millbrook, but it was no longer a symbol of dark secrets and hidden crimes. It had become a place of memory and healing, where the victims of Dr. Blackwood's experiments were finally honored and remembered. And sometimes, late at night when the Memorial Center was closed, visitors reported seeing lights in the mansions, windows, and catching the scent of lavender perfume drifting through the halls. But these were no longer frightening signs. They were peaceful reminders that the dead could finally rest, now that their stories had been told and their suffering acknowledged. The truth had set them free. Sarah often thought about her great-aunt Margaret, the woman she had never met who had left her the mansion. She wondered if Margaret had known about the hidden room and the evidence it contained. Maybe Margaret had spent years waiting for someone brave enough to uncover the truth. In her will, Margaret had written a simple message. "To my great-niece, Sarah. Some gifts come with great responsibility. Use this wisely." Sarah had done her best to honor that responsibility. The victims of the Blackwood mansion finally had justice, even if it came 70 years too late, and in a world where powerful people often escape consequences for their crimes, that justice meant everything.